Good morning. I know you're out there. I'm David Carmicheal. I'm the director of the State Archives in Pennsylvania, and I want to welcome you to the Archives and Records Management Conference for 2017. We have been doing this for many, many years. The other day, Cindy Bendroth found a brochure from 1992, I think it was, where I was one of the speakers at the ARM conference while I was still living in New York. So we have been doing this a very long time, and we're glad that you're here. If you are in the room here, just a couple of housekeeping matters. For one thing, you are on video if you're in the room. So if that is not something you want, you can move to the back of the room where you won't be captured on the video. We want to be aware of that. The restrooms are in the foyer, and the emergency exits are at the back of the room and the side over here. Now, if you're joining us online from your office, we assume you know where the restrooms and the emergency exits are, so we won't go there. If you are joining us online, you can thank Commonwealth Media Services for that ability. They're over here in the booth taking care of us. And because of Commonwealth Media Services, about 150 or 60 of you did not have to get in cars or trains or planes and come to Harrisburg for this conference. And so we deeply appreciate what they are doing for us, because if it weren't for them, we wouldn't be able to do this. And so I think that's a great tax savings and money savings for them to pitch in and help us with this. So thank you very much, guys, for all your help on making this happen. I also want to thank the State Historic Records Advisory Board for their assistance with this. They are helping us fund this and put it together. And in Pittsburgh, they're hosting a satellite location for this meeting. So we thank the Heinz History Center and John Paul Deli and Andy Masick for helping us in that way. So thank you. If you are remote, the bottom of the screen, I think it's on the bottom of the screen, there is a button where you can submit questions, and we ask you to do that. We're going to hold those to the end to see how much time we have. If we run out of time for the questions, we will try to get back to you with an answer in some way after the conference. All right, so without further ado, I want to introduce the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission, Andrea Lowery.
Thanks, David. Thank you, everyone who came here to participate and everyone who's online. We're really glad that you all are participating. I understand that last year was so successful that this is the second year we're doing a webinar. So we're pleased we can offer that opportunity. And again, thank you to Commonwealth Media. Just a little bit about me. I'm trained as an architect. I've worked as a preservationist and architectural historian for the last 25 years. I do understand the importance of preserving the past, and I will say I've worked with a lot of archivists, a lot of archival material, and the work that you all do has been the backbone of all the work that I've been able to do. So I'm deeply appreciative of all that you guys do, maintaining records, preserving the past, and making them accessible to people like me. In fact, one of my first jobs straight out of college or graduate school was living essentially at the National Archives in College Park for 3 years. Felt like 3 years, 3 months, pouring through records that had been kept assiduously about the construction of buildings in the Federal Triangle. And the archivists I worked with there were fantastic. They guided me, a newbie, through the whole process of using archival records and really understanding the importance of what you all do. I've done that here at PHMC as well. I've been lucky to work with the staff here, researching buildings that we own across the Commonwealth and using that material to guide restoration projects here. So thank you very much. Those records have helped me answer critical questions and really helped in preserving physically the architecture of the Commonwealth. So I do understand the importance of all that you do and the records that you maintain and the value that you all provide, whether you work with state agencies or counties or municipalities or historical institutions or universities. You all provide a wealth of information. And you may not always get the support that you need or deserve. Some people may not understand the significance of what you do or the value of the records you keep or even really what you do. So as a records manager or as an archivist. But we here at PHMC do understand and do value all you do to help governments run efficiently and preserve our past and assist the public. So in the coming years, I hope to meet some of you. PHMC is glad to provide you the support that we can, and it's important to me that we continue to do so. So thank you very much for attending.
Thank you, Andrea. She really does get it, and it's nice to work for somebody who understands what we're trying to accomplish. So thanks, Andrea. All right, we're going to move right into the first session. I do have a question. Martina Soden, did she arrive? Okay, so our first speaker didn't arrive, but that's okay. We're going to scramble the order and hope that she's going to get here in a few minutes. She may be stuck looking for parking. I don't know. We have 3 speakers, hopefully, in this first session on utilizing primary sources. Martina Soden is the head of reference services at Scranton Public Library, and we will move her to the end of the order. Rachel Grove Rohrbaugh is the archivist at Elizabethtown College, and Sally Flaherty is the social studies content advisor with the Pennsylvania Department of Education. All 3 of these people have long CVs that I could read, but I'd rather hear from them. So we're going to get started right away with their program. So I don't know which of you is going first. Rachel? All right.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here with you today. I do understand that these slides will be shared after today, so you should have the links to the resources that I'm going to share throughout the presentation. But please feel free to contact me. I have my email address up there, grover@etown.edu, or Grover, like the Sesame Street character, if you want to remember it. I really am happy to be speaking with you about teaching with primary sources. It's a topic I am really passionate about. As the archivist at a small college, one of the most important ways that I can prove the value of the archives and special collections is through direct student use of our materials, particularly when they are tied to a class project or assignment. But even if you aren't in an academic setting, keep in mind that every student we reach is a new person who is a user of archives and potentially an advocate down the road for all the work that we do. I want to start by saying that no part of what I'm going to share this morning sprang directly from my own head. The community of archivists and librarians and educators who are interested in teaching with primary sources is full of energetic people willing to share ideas. And one of the most important resources for me has been the Society of American Archivists Teaching with and About Primary Sources Committee and some of their initiatives. And these are resources that I hope you will take advantage of as well. Just listing a few here, they include their TPS Expo, used to be known as the Unconference. This has been held for several years, usually one of the days before the SAA annual meeting kicks off. It is free, you just have to register ahead. And they have morning workshops and then afternoon unconference sessions, and they're all about teaching with primary sources. They're currently looking for a venue for the 2018 meeting in Washington, D.C. For the expo. And one nice thing, too, is the 2018 SA annual meeting is going to be a joint meeting with the Council of State Archivists and Nagara, so we might reach an even broader audience as well. They also try to invite educators from the local community, so it is really a wonderful opportunity to talk about teaching with primary sources. Another initiative that I've been involved in is the TPS Bibliography and Resource Bank. So this is a helpful bibliography of books, articles, chapters, all about teaching with primary sources, primarily from the perspective of archivists and special collections librarians, because if you did a bibliography that expanded to teachers as well, then you'd have even more of a wealth of information. It might be overwhelming. This committee has also been just involved in advocacy for teaching with primary sources within the archival profession. They recently discussed encouraging coursework on TPS in archives and records management graduate school programs, and then also seeing it included in the content for the Certified Archivist exam. And then finally, a wider SAA initiative. It's not just part of this committee, but actually expands to the Association of College and Research Libraries, and particularly their rare books and manuscripts section. And this is a task force on developing standards on primary source literacy. They just presented the final draft of those standards at the SAA annual meeting in Portland, and they are online, and you can view those and see what the exact standards they're looking for students to have when they're using archival materials and primary sources. All right. So beyond SAA, some additional resources for archivists to consider. The Mid-Atlantic Regional Archives Conference offers a variety of workshops. They tend to be pretty affordable compared to some other organizations. And their upcoming workshop on October 26th in DC is Archives on the Move, Developing an Educational Outreach Initiative for Your Archive. And this is going to be specifically focusing on K-12 outreach for Common Core. I believe registration is still available for that, so October 26th. Also, the Library of Congress, for a very long time, has been an advocate for teaching with primary sources. They've partnered with colleges and universities to offer teacher workshops for particularly K-12 curriculum development. But if you go to their website, they have a variety of resources to help you get started with using primary sources in the classroom. Another website I'd like to recommend is teacharchives.org. This website hosts a wealth of information on TPS, including articles on important skills like how to develop learning objectives, use technology in the classroom, and much more. What's really great about this website, too, is they include sample exercises that you can do with students. And this content came out of a 3-year grant-funded program at the Brooklyn Historical Society. I've also listed here, I won't read them all, some recently published books. There seems to be a new one every year or two on teaching with primary sources. The ones I've listed here are all for an audience of archivists and librarians specifically. All right, so the title of my presentation today specifically promises ideas and resources for active learning in the archives, but I want to explain what I mean by active learning. So I'm sharing a passage here from that 2016 Teaching with Primary Sources volume, which is in that SAA Trends in Archives Practice series. So I'll just quickly read the quote. Active learning environments provide students with the chance to learn by doing. This type of learning provides opportunities for a high level of student interaction, peer learning, and problem solving. Students are actively engaged in the learning process, and the faculty teachers are more guide on the side than sage on the stage, end quote. So with this model in mind, archivists are working with students. They'll want to spend less class time on show and tell. Like, think about maybe in the past you might have students come in and they just learn the basic reading room rules, care and handling, how to use the finding aids. But instead of that, you're thinking about a model where students are actually doing exercises and activities that help them read, analyze, and interpret primary sources. So actively engaging with the materials. So in that same SAA volume, the authors offer some broad categories for types of learning activities. Some of the ones they list are just group activities, so having students work together in teams. Always classroom discussion is great, getting them talking and thinking about what they're looking at. You can even have students be in debates, so have them take a pro-con, one side or the other, when looking at materials. In-class writing assignments can be great, so have students work on a very short, 2-minute paper, and then break into the larger group and discuss their findings. Problem solving. So this, if you want to read about sort of larger initiatives towards problem-based learning, so that kind of style where you have an issue and then you have the students trying to solve it with the resources that they have there, that can be a wonderful model for teaching with primary sources. Role playing, so having students kind of put themselves in the shoes of a particular historical figure or person they learn about in the archives. Presentations are always classic, and then just general peer learning, so learning from each other and not just from the professor or the teacher standing at the front of the room. Now, all these activities require careful planning and collaboration with the teacher or professor, but they can ultimately be more rewarding and beneficial to the students. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to work with your instructor. It's actually essential. There's a number of reasons why, but just a few here. You need to really be able to understand and incorporate appropriate learning objectives into your session. And when you work with the professor or teacher, that's going to be a lot easier. You can also learn the classroom dynamics, such as if they're a more talkative group, a more quiet group. You can also get a sense of the students' strengths and weaknesses. Generally, what is their reading level, what background knowledge or prior experience do they have that will inform the session. Collaborating with the instructor also helps you see your role in the overall curriculum and not just have it as a standalone session, but something that's really going to benefit them throughout the class and hopefully throughout their educational career. You can also, when you're working with the instructor, look towards building an appropriate assessment. So you can actually measure what the students learn and hopefully, over the long term, improve your teaching and improve the sessions that you offer. If at all possible, make sure the instructor is actually on hand for the class session. They can help keep the students on track and make sure they understand how they're actually going to apply the knowledge in the course or in future assignments. The archivist level of involvement can vary quite a bit, but they're all valuable in particular situations. Here are just a few broad categories. You can have just a one-shot session, which is just what it sounds like, a one-time session with the students, introduction to archives research or working with primary sources. This can be a little more challenging, but sometimes given what the curriculum is, that might be all that the instructor can offer. The second one is something I end up doing a lot is, 1, 2 in-class sessions, but then a lot of individual consults with the students. And this can be helpful if they do have specific research projects they're working on, so then you can help them, guide them towards resources that are helpful for their particular paper. I've also had some experience with multi-session, or sometimes it'll be referred to as embedded instruction. And this is archival sessions where the assignments or the archival assignments are integrated throughout the semester. This does require intensive collaboration with the instructor, but is ideal for making sure that the content is reinforced throughout the curriculum. Another example is online and in-person hybrid. This is particularly helpful if you do want to cover things like care and handling, how to use a finding aid. You can do that online before the session, and then be able to spend more class time on actually reading and analyzing primary sources. Some institutions are actually also doing just online-only modules. One really cool example of this is at Smith College. They actually created a MOOC, or a massive open online course, related to women's political activism, and they incorporated use of their Sophia Smith collection. I believe you can still go online and find that course. The last one, co-teaching, I have had some experience with this at Elizabethtown, and I'll just talk briefly in a few slides about that. So some practical matters. Plan for logistics and really over budget time. For example, how will the students and faculty find the archives, and how much time do they need to get there? Sometimes they're coming from their classroom to the archives, and it can be tricky to get there. And also, if you're going to go out to them, how will you safely get the materials to the class if you are going to bring originals? I can't emphasize enough how important it is to just select a small sample of a collection or just a few items. Students can be overwhelmed by too many materials, so it's better to focus on just 1 or 2 items or a very small collection. In a lot of cases, you're going to have to provide some context. Depending on what the students already know, you need to provide sometimes some background information on the materials. But at the same time, you want to let the students explore and discuss their conclusions, but at the same time, don't make assumptions about their subject knowledge. Consider if you're going to provide facsimiles, originals, or digital items. Students can be very excited, very, very excited to see the real thing, but multiple copies can also be more practical and allow the students to highlight passages and take notes. And then, particularly if you're going to have just one short session, consider providing a transcript of handwritten documents, particularly if you have limited time to discuss the materials, because I think it's been complained about enough, students really do have trouble with handwriting, so you don't want to waste a lot of class time on that. So now for some examples. I'll have 3 quick examples of some things that I've done at Elizabethtown. The first is a photography timeline. I actually learned this activity from Doris Malkmus. She's since retired, but she was the outreach archivist at Penn State, and she always had such great ideas for working with students. And what she had showed me was where you could provide students with a number of different images of usually a building, and then have them put them in order by date, just based on the clues that they see in the images. And I love this for several reasons. It's a nice warm-up activity. It doesn't really take more than about 15 minutes. And it's also great because it touches on both visual literacy and primary source literacy, and it works well in groups. My second example is a class that I worked on with Dr. Richard Newton. Richard is a religious studies professor at Elizabethtown, and this was for a course on the New Testament. And the students in this class read and discussed pamphlets that we have in our collection that relate to Brethren responses to issues of war and peace. So for some context, the Brethren are traditionally conscientious objectors, so they have a lot of materials about war. So in an assignment, the students were asked to explain how the pamphlets cited the New Testament, and actually in a second session, they shared those findings with local members of the Church of the Brethren that we had invited to come and talk with the students. In the first session, I did briefly have to provide context for the students on who the Brethren are and their evolving stance on military involvement. But the professor and I used most of the class time for guided group discussion. There was a graded assignment, which is always preferable. If it's for a grade, students are always going to pay a little more attention. And one of the best parts was that follow-up discussion with the Brethren church members. It showed the students how archival materials can be applied to present community issues, and it let us see in a form beyond their papers what the students had learned. In that New Testament class and other courses I've been involved with, this Annenberg Center Learning Artifact Reading Method or similar models has been useful for getting the students thinking about what they're reading or what they're seeing. And it's helpful to have students ask these kind of specific questions of a document. This is just one model. There's a lot out there if you look for like document analysis, but it's one that I've used more recently and found that works well. My final example today is a semester-long course that I co-taught with Jean-Paul Benowitz at Elizabethtown in spring 2016. Students researched local architecture, and they actually looked for grants that could possibly support the preservation of the buildings. Because I was with the students throughout the entire semester, I could help them throughout the research process and also suggest other local institutions that they could visit for their research, like lancasterhistory.org. And I think that was important to show students that a lot of times archival research doesn't just stop at the particular institution you're at, but you might need to go on to other places. And the image here is of students presenting their findings at Elizabethtown's Scholarship and Creative Arts Day. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, I love teaching with primary sources. I think it's so important for everyone to be thinking about it no matter what kind of archives you are at. And if you want to talk more about it or you want access to some of the resources I mentioned, please feel free to contact me. And my email address is there again for you. Are we going to move on to the next speaker? Is that okay? Excellent. All right, so Sally is up next then.
Good morning. I'm Sally Flaherty, and I am the Social Studies Content Advisor at the Department of Education. Many people do not even know that there is a content advisor at the Department of Education. But we have an entire division that is content advisors for math, science, technical education, driver's education, health and physical education, English as a second language learners, and of course, the most important, social studies. I keep teasing them that it all goes back to history, everything. We just had a holiday this week, brought to you by history. So we are very, very happy with that. I want to thank Rachel very much for what she was talking about in helping our educators. My job is to help the educators as well to make their jobs easier. Now, Pennsylvania is a locally controlled state. Now, do you know what that means? That means that all decisions based in the curriculum of what is taught, when it's taught, is done at the local level by the locally elected school board officials. The state does not tell what to teach and when to teach it. Many times I have educators that look at me and say, just tell me what I'm supposed to do. It's like, yeah, I am. We have the academic standards. The academic standards are part of Chapter 4 of the Pennsylvania School Code, 1949. And in social studies, we have these 4 areas of civics and government, economics, geography, and history. These are concept standards. Now, I'll get into that in a little bit. What are the academic standards? They're the minimum requirement for every learner. They are the floor. You can build from it, you can make them more rigorous, but you cannot detract from it. Every student is designed to meet each one of the academic standards in the content areas. Our concept standards mean that we are looking for that overarching big idea of principles and documents of government. Whereas some states have content standards where you have to know the 4 presidents on Mount Rushmore, they have civil rights standards, they have Civil War standards, they have World War I standards, things you have to learn from each of these eras. But we do not. Because social studies teachers have to teach everything from Plato to NATO. And how do you decide? Well, that's done on many, many different levels. And it depends on you knowing your students and knowing your community and knowing what your learning objectives are, but using the academic standards to guide you and build the curriculum. The standards are not a curriculum. They are the overarching ideas of the why you teach what you teach. So every curriculum in Pennsylvania is built at the local level. I go in to advise on content, thus the title, okay? Now, we also have academic standards for reading in history and the social studies. These were added in 2014. Everything that a teacher needs to know of what a student has to know and be able to do before they graduate is in the academic standards. They're a wonderful framework. So when you are looking at having a group come in, as Rachel talked about, you have to look and ask the teacher, yes, what's the student learning objectives, but what are the standards you want to meet by having the students use these primary documents? And how do you do that? Everything is in the academic standards. This is what we want students to know and be able to do by using primary documents. We want them to read, understand, respond. We want comprehension, vocabulary acquisition, using textual evidence. It's all right there. Use them. It's a wonderful guide to help build your interactions with students. This is where you can access the academic standards. There are two sets of academic standards. One is from the State Board of Education. That's the second one. Those are the official standards that went through the regulatory process and are part of Chapter 4. Those were adopted in 2002. They are very detailed. They give examples. They tell you what you need to do. Now, in 2009, there was a revision, and these are draft voluntary standards, and they are on the pdesas.org website, which is something that should be your friend if you are going to be working with educators. The PDESAS website is the website for curriculum. It is what the Department of Education has done to support educators in the classrooms. The 2009 standards are a consolidation. They've made it easier. They took out a lot of the details to let the professional fill in. But always, what do? We go back to the primary document, which is 2002. So you must use both to do that. And these concepts, now what we have in standards, oh, by the way, we do not have Common Core standards in Pennsylvania. They were not adopted. We do not have Common Core. If you have districts that are using Common Core, that's a local decision, but it is not from the Department of Education. So how we use the standards. You look at the standard that is to be assessed. That is what's going to drive your lesson and your unit. So we look at standards to be assessed. We're going to look at 3: civics and government, principles and documents of government. We're going to look at history, documents, writings, and oral traditions. And within history, we're going to look at conflict and cooperation. Those are the standards as an educator that I'm going to assess in a unit. And my learning goal is, how do documents and writings provide evidence of conflict and cooperation in government? Now, conflict and cooperation traditionally is thought of as wars. But conflict and cooperation is government. It also is from an international level, to a national level, to a state level, to a local level, to a family, to an individual level. These are the concepts we're talking about. We have many students that will be able to meet the standard using international information, and some that will be able to link the national with the international. But you know, those students that can link it personally to what happened in my town, in my state, actually have the concept as well. Okay? In history and government, we have these 4 standard areas, and I know it's small, but this is part of the academic standards that you can access. And there are basically 4 concepts in history for us to address, and that is political and cultural contributions of individuals and groups, how continuity and change have influenced history, conflict and cooperation among social groups and organizations, and primary documents, material artifacts, and historical places. it gives you examples in each one of these. This is a blowout of the primary documents, material, artifacts, and historical places. This is what we want our students to be able to use to gain knowledge. We want them to look at documents, writings, and oral history, letters, diaries, fiction, nonfiction, newspapers, other media, which also include political cartoons, photographs. It's all primary documents, but you know that. We have to be the example for our educators. Sometimes our educators want them to only look at documents. Well, we have students that have trouble reading English in 2017, let alone translating a document from 1824, okay? And we do know that cursive writing is the secret code of adults. That's what we've learned, because if you want kids not to know what you're writing, just write it in cursive. Many of our archives and many libraries are using this opportunity to provide classes in the evening for students to teach them this secret code and use it so they can interpret the documents for themselves. We also have to look at conflict and cooperation. This is what we mean by conflict and cooperation. It can be domestic, it can be ethnic and racial relations, immigration and migration, labor relations, and military conflicts. All of these things to get our students to understand conflict and cooperation at every level. Okay. So let's say an educator chooses conflict and cooperation in Theodore Roosevelt's presidency. He's going to look at the Panama Canal. When we look at the Panama Canal, these are the various documents that we are going to look at. And this is like a checklist. You don't want to just have one without the others, because we want a comprehensive look, like I said, internationally, nationally, state, local, personal. You're going to look at all these government documents, letters, diaries, newspapers, photographs. And where do we look for those? At the archives. We want our students to understand that the Panama Canal happened in Central America, but it affected everyone in the United States. Another example would be FDR and the New Deal. Many of our educators look at the New Deal as it affected the nation, but there is not a community in Pennsylvania that was not affected by the New Deal. In my hometown in Western Pennsylvania, back in the 30s, they had basketball teams that played each other in the communities. It was the entertainment for the winter, and there was a high rivalry. Well, one community decided to get money from the WPA, and they built a gymnasium with brick and a hardwood floor. And everyone was just about their new gymnasium. Now, my hometown, though, they were happy with their little wooden structure and their semi-hardwood floor because they weren't going to take any money from that Democrat. And you know how we know that? I went to the archives. And you see, this also shows continuity and change, that divisiveness is not new for 2017. It was in 1930s as well, and the 1820s, and the 1860s. You get it. Continuity and change. It's history. So you are going to help connect the students to personal connection to history. Yes, George Washington kept a diary. Many of our students keep a diary. There's a cover letter for the Declaration of Independence. Yes, they followed protocol. It was a business. So we link our business students to, yes, they followed protocol then. And Mr. Dunlap did not have any typos in the final document, did he? But what better way to look at conflict and cooperation than looking at the various drafts that you have that have been revised and revisions from your local municipality to your township supervisors to the Declaration of Independence. Okay? Oops, went the wrong way. So right from the academic standards, these are the standards. Now, the numbers of the code, that's just to help teachers look and know where they are. You don't have to memorize the numbers. That's why we wrote them down, right? But we want the student to be doing this. Every primary document they look at, we want them to know these things. Every fiction, every photograph, everything they do. This is it. The archives are the means to the end so that they are reading to learn. And that is the key to being a lifelong learner. Please understand that these academic standards are there for you to use as a framework. Get them to the ultimate concept. This is not about dead men and dates. Color the map, make the timeline. This is about understanding the complexity of our past so that we can learn from the past to make decisions today for a better tomorrow. The educator uses their expertise to determine the material and resources the student will use in meeting the learning objectives. So please, as part of your dialogue with instructors, please ask them, what academic standards are you using? Kick your dialogue up to, we can use this for conflict and cooperation. We can use this resource to show continuity and change. And that's what we used with the photographs on the timelines from Penn State. What a wonderful way to show continuity and change. What a wonderful way to have students look at their own communities and know the history in their own backyards. That's why we want to use the archives. History's personal. History is the story of people. And we don't want to lose sight of that. What can be done? Know the academic standards. Be very familiar with them. I don't mean the numbers, I mean those concepts. How does unlimited wants with limited resources affect liberty and freedom? Big question, but we know that with guidance, our students will be able to understand that and be able to answer that. Know the content that's going to link. We love content. But link to why do I need to know this? Because teaching from Plato to NATO can't be done. There are big gaps because we only have so much time. But we can teach our students how to study, how to learn, how to use those primary documents so it opens up the world to them and they will constantly be coming back and back and back to the archives to learn their rich history as an individual. If you need any assistance in looking at the academic standards, looking at your role in linking to the teachers and the districts and the students and the people of your community, please reach out to me. I am here to make your jobs easier. That's what it's all about. Thank you so much for what you do for the students in Pennsylvania. Thank you for what you are doing to support the educators in Pennsylvania, because that really is going to make the difference for our future. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Martina Soden. I'm head of reference at the Scranton Public Library. And actually, I have a good follow-up, kind of what Sally was talking about, because I'm actually going to talk about using local history materials in middle school. In this case, it's going to be the Scranton High School. So first, I'm going to talk about the background and why this started. In 1957, Dr. Elizabeth Williams, she wrote this book, The History and Geography of Scranton and its Vicinity. This was actually a curriculum. This was a book that the students in middle school had. So when they did their social studies courses, this was the book that they got handed out to them. And they may have been using something else before this started. But this is the book that kind of what people know, especially like my director. He knew this book. This is how they learned local history in the schools. And for many years they used this. And then at some point, times changed, things changed, and this book was pushed aside, and I don't believe that local history was really being taught as much as it should have been. And so we come to 2015, and we're looking at the sesquicentennial of Scranton. And this was a big event, and we were getting ready for it. And everybody said, how can we all get involved? The teachers of the Scranton School District, the middle school teachers, wanted to be involved. They wanted to get their students to understand, wow, this huge anniversary is coming up. How can we be active in it as well? So we all sat down, and this was a collaboration for the Scranton School District, Lackawanna Historical Society, and the Scranton Public Library. Because the Scranton School District has an interesting history, and Scranton alone has an interesting history. In the 50s, that was the end of coal mining. Trolley cars, the street cars were ending their run. Railroads, what we knew as railroads, were ending. And all of the students in the schools, they could all relate to their families were maybe coal miners. They may have worked in the railroads. They were largely European immigrants. Scranton's largely immigrant base. Now, in the current times, Scranton's also a huge immigrant community. It's like a melting pot. Indian communities, we've got Indian communities, Nepalese, Hispanic, Pakistani, Afghani. I believe there's over 20 different languages spoken in the Scranton School District. So it is a large immigrant community in ESL, English as second language students. Most of these students were not born in Scranton. They have no input or feeling on the city, and they don't know the history of it. So what came out of this meeting was to do a grant through the Scranton Area Foundation. And the grant was done to actually create like a curriculum guide that the students could use and the teachers in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade would be able to start using in the schools. So in 2016, last summer, we met with the teachers, Historical Society, the library, and some of the 6th, 7th, 8th grade students from Scranton. And we decided what they were interested in, what they wanted to teach, what the time periods were. The 6th grade teachers wanted to teach up to 1865. They wanted to know the early histories of Scranton. They were looking at the Native American communities and the very first settlers, and how the settlements and how the area started. Now, the 7th graders, the teachers were more interested in 1865 to 1878. So their time period is very small, but so much happened in Scranton at that time between your first coal strikes to 1878 was when Lackawanna County was formed from Luzerne County. So industrialization was really starting, so the teachers kind of wanted that time period for 7th grade. And now 8th grade got the huge time frame, 1878 to present. They felt that these students, they had been around in Scranton long enough that they wanted them to see the changes of the city from 1878 to now. They wanted to show them the coal strikes in 1900, the mine disasters, the flu of 1918. All of these stages, including the decline of the industrial age of Scranton. And their focus was, after that industrial age, they want to also teach how Scranton has rebounded, to show them that there is a respect for the city and a love of the city. I think they want the students to come back home when they leave, to realize that this is their home city, and there's lots going on. So the dates are fluid, but the focus is on the stages. So that grant, what that grant did is the Historical Society created this book, The Story of Scranton. And it's about 35 to 40 pages, and it's a curriculum book. This is what the students are getting. So when the teachers, and they're going to be starting to teach the subjects in school this year. So I can't talk about how successful it's going as of yet. This year is the big year for it. So they're going to be using this book, and they're going to be developing anything from how the Revolutionary War affected this area, starting to build those ideas into their studies. And they're going to be using that book, The Story of Scranton. Now, the Scranton Public Library side of it, what we did is the teachers also wanted some kind of website. They wanted their students to have access to primary and secondary sources quickly and easily. But instead, we want them to still come in the library, go to the Historical Society. We all have documents. But for the times when they can't, we wanted them to be able to access something. So this is the Teaching Local History site, and it's ssdlocalhistory.org. And right away, you can see that we've put the story of Scranton on there. For the students who left their book in school, we wanted them to have something to access when they were home doing their homework. Now, this project, this website is made so it's specifically geared towards 6th, 7th, 8th graders. We wanted to make it easy to use. We know that we have a wide degree of levels of English from the students to the older students, from the young and to old. So there's different topics on here, from photos, books, paintings, illustrations, maps, and letters, and then the story of Scranton. So what the teachers want to do, in this photo right here that you can see, this is the wholesale block in downtown Scranton. These photos, books, paintings, will help them as they're generating the projects. They want students to be able to do a project. They don't care what kind of project they do. They have to take an item from one of these images, and they can now build something from it. So what they can find that they love, just to find a part of Scranton that they actually love, to keep going with it. So here's another one. This is one of the paintings, illustrations. This is General Sullivan's Indian expedition in 1779. We wanted the students to understand that we had a role around the Revolution, that there was something that was happening in the Wyoming and Lackawanna valleys. And this is some letters that are here. And letters we've actually transcribed, just because we do understand the cursive writing. That's the hard part. I even say as an adult, I can even struggle with figuring out what some of the words are. And I learned cursive in school. But so we've transcribed every letter on here. We want the students to know exactly what they're reading so they can understand the content. This one's Moses Taylor in the Steamtown letter. So Steamtown National Historic Site is very important in our area. Moses Taylor, another very important person. He first developed the first hospital, the Moses Taylor Hospital in the city. So we want them to understand, the students to understand who Moses Taylor is, because they just think of it as a hospital. They don't realize it's actually a person who was very important to the area. He ran railroads. He kind of was into a lot. Railroads and land was his thing. So if you have any more questions, we want everybody to understand that what we're trying to do is bring back local history into the schools. It's been a long time coming, I think, and we are so excited when we see students come into the library and they see these documents, and these documents are like, wow, I'm really holding something from the 1800s. This is unbelievable. But they're like, I don't understand how this is involved in our local area. And to explain that, there's so many prominent individuals who came through and were around Scranton. Every day we get researchers coming in, and when these researchers come in, they come from all over the world because so many people came through Scranton, through the coal mining and the railroads, and the city was so huge at one time, to have the students understand that there was really an importance to the city, and it was fundamental in creating the United States for what it is today. So if you have any more questions for me, please go ahead and you can email me, ask me questions, and I can talk more about the project. Thank you.
Just wanted to say thank you again to Rachel, Martina, and Sally. And if anyone has any questions for the three of them, we got out of the gate a little bit quickly this morning, so we do have a little bit of extra time. If anybody has any questions, we'd certainly like to open that up for discussion. Yes?
Is it possible to get that book, The Story in Scranton?
I know a certain number were actually written. You'd have to check with the Historical Society. They may have extras they actually have for sale. Select One Historical Society.
I happen to be the recorder of deeds for Lackawanna County, and they do have some, but I think that at one point they were just making sure that the students were accommodated. But I have, I'm going to try to get some myself, because people come into my office doing the history, whether they want to pose in the building where the office was, where it was filmed, or they want to do something else. So that's the kind of stuff they're looking for. But I will, if you give me your card, I'll find out.
Does see another hand?
I have a question for Martina. Can you describe a little bit more about the partnership that you had with the local historical society in writing that book, and how many people were involved, and how long did it take you to do that?
14 years.
So originally, there were a lot of people involved in the first time we met in 2015. That was when the discussion was about how we can just do something for the sesquicentennial. And from there, what happened was then we did reach the broader scope of the project that I just discussed. The group that made up the school district, the project, it was a few of us from the library, the Historical Society, and I believe there were 6 teachers. They wanted to make sure there were representatives from each of the grades, so 6th, 7th, and 8th. And that made up the group that we got together. So I think there was about 10 of us all together for the whole group. So, yeah.
Just to follow up, who wrote the book? Was that a collaborative project, or was that largely the historical?
That was Historical Society. They have, their knowledge is so wide, and they have their assistant director, she has had experience writing books before, so she was able to do that. And then from there, the grant was used to send the book off to the printer.
And we certainly welcome any other questions. And just a reminder to those of you who are attending remotely through the webinar, you're welcome to submit questions online. If we don't get to those immediately, we can certainly respond back to you at a later time. And to that point as well, to those of you who are attending remotely, we did get off to a little bit of a quick start. These slides will be made available to those remote attendees as well as everyone on site here after today's presentation, and we also intend to upload the videos to PHMC's YouTube page, hopefully by the end of this week or early next week, depending on when we're able to get those files uploaded to the site. Quick announcement, if anybody from PennDOT is missing their badge, please see me after I'm done here at the podium. Otherwise, I guess we'll be back about 10:45. I know that's a bit of an extended break early on, but again, we're going to try and keep on time for the webinar sessions. There is a cafeteria out at the end of the hall if you proceed past that little foyer area there. So feel free. You're welcome, despite what the sign says out at the doors, you're welcome to bring back coffee, water, a little bite to eat. So otherwise, we'll look forward to seeing you at 10:45.